Hi, this is just a basic video to get you started on Godot 4's Tilemap editor and auto-tiling. It is by no means comprehensive. I am not an expert, but I will try to show you at least a few tips on getting started with the auto-tiling feature. All right, so let's start by downloading the assets we need. If you just come here to Google and search for Kenny Road textures and click on the first link, it'll be this set right here. Go ahead and download it. Please feel free to support Kenny and all these free assets. All right, so we're gonna open up the zip file. We're gonna come here to the tile sheet and we're gonna grab this top one, the road textures tile sheet.png, and just drag that out. Good, so now we have our resources. So let's come and make a new project. And we'll come here, let's make a new project. We'll go to my Godot folder. Tilemap test and create the folder. All right. So now that we have the Godot editor open, I'm going to come to the 2D pane and I'm going to create a new scene here. I'm just going to make it a basic node. And to that node, we're going to add a child scene. Just search here for Tilemap. Just like that. All right. So we now are in the Tilemap. And as you can see, there's a few little features here that you might notice. So here's the Tilemap button has come up, and this the inspector has a new area over here. So let's start by walking through some of these properties really quickly. The tile set is what you're going to be using for the Tilemap to actually lay down tiles, and those are going to be the actual textures. The cell quadrant size does not actually relate to the tile size. It has to do with how much of the tiles are redrawn when they need to be by the engine, and that's more going to affect performance than it is going to affect any in-game setting. So you have to play with that size based on the platform you're using, whether it's Windows or Android or whatever, and then go from there. So the next thing we're going to do is these other options are obviously more advanced for collisions. So the first thing we need to do for the tile map is to create a tile set. So here we're going to click on this arrow and we're going to click new tile set. And now we have a new tile set. And as you can see here, there's now a little bit of a grid overlay, and that's going to be helpful for drawing our actual tile set. If you need to look for the more advanced options, remember you can always click on the tile set and you'll see the pop-up additional options. And we're going to definitely need this in a little bit. If any of these options are ever grayed out, just come here to the little drop-down menu in the tile set and click Edit. And that will allow you to change the settings. Now, if it looks like we've switched to a new settings, and that's because we're in it. So just remember to get back out. You can always click this little arrow, and that'll get you back to the inspector that you're used to. See, we're right now in the tile set specific, but now we're back in the tile map itself. The other way, if you ever get stuck in that little window, is if you click off, you can always click back on, and then it'll reset the view. Now that we have the tile set, as you'll notice, there's now two categories down here, the tile set and the tile map. The tile set is where we're going to do all our setup. The tile map is where we're going to do all our actual drawing of the objects. So now what we need to do is come in here and drag in our tile set. So we'll do that by going back to this textures and dragging it into our project. Now that we have that, you can see we can add this textures to the tiles, and we want to be on that tile tab. So we've now created a we've now created the tile sheet texture. It'll ask you the Atlas texture was modified. You want to create tiles, and you can hit yes, and you've automatically created the tiles. So let's make this window a little bigger so we can see what's going on. And as you can see, there's these 3 categories, and I'll show you what we're going to do with those categories when we're setting up. But the first thing we notice is this does not look right. Our tiles do not look like the right size, right? This tile is much smaller than this tiles. Well, it turns out that the texture tile sheet we're using has 64 by 64 pixels, and we are in 16 pixels. So let's go back up here, click on the tile set, and as you can see, the tile size was wrong when we started it. Okay, so how do we fix that? So the first thing we want to do is make sure our tile size is set to 64 pixels by 64 pixels. Now, as you can see, that has now made the grid size bigger, but this still looks messed up. So where do we have to go next? We have to go into the Atlas, so remember, under Setup, on the tile set, under Setup, you're going to see this area called Texture Region Size. And this is what we want to be also 64 by 64 pixels. And as you can see, when we modify that, we now have the correct grid size. As you can see, the tiles were already added, so we can come here and we can click. Now we can click on the tile map, and we can just click on a texture and start adding them. Oop, and then, nope, I don't want that. And then maybe I'll do a little bit here, and maybe I'll have a intersection, and then I'll add one here, and add another here, and maybe make this curve. But as you can see, this is getting a little bit tedious to have to click on each individual tile and to draw this road. And so what we want now is we want a tile, we want to use the auto tiling feature. And how do we go ahead and do that? The first thing really quickly before we do that is I just want to show you what happens if we don't use the, let's say we hit no to the automatic tile, because maybe I don't want to use all of these tiles. Like I'm not going to use these water tiles. So how do we adjust that? So let me do that first. So we're going to come here and we're going to hit, we're going to go to the tile set. Remember, tile set is where we edit, and I'm going to hit the little delete. Now we've ruined all those tiles, so you can come back to the tile map and we just erase them, and I'm using right click to erase. All right, so I'm going to drag in the tile set, and now fortunately, because we've set the tile size correctly, it's going to set the region size. But let's hit no. We're not going to automatically create the tiles, and now I want to select them. So how do I select them? Well, I go to the tile set, and I go to setup, and I can start to click on the tiles that I want to use. I'm going to use these curvy tiles instead of these rectangle tiles. So I'm going to use the straight road, the right road, these tiles. I'm going to use the T intersections, and I'm going to use the dead ends and the intersection. So we're going to start with a very basic auto tiling map, and then we'll look at the more advanced feature in a minute. So we've now selected the tiles we want to use just by clicking on them, and you can actually just hold down the left mouse button and drag. Oops, but now I have all these tiles I don't want. So now what do? How do I get rid of it? You can just right click on there and hit this delete key. The problem, though, you're going to find is if you use the actual delete key on your keyboard, it'll say delete node tile map, and if you hit OK, you're actually going to delete the whole tile map. So just be careful with that. Unfortunately, that delete hotkey doesn't work. So I'm going to hit Control-Z to undelete my tile map, and that'll get you there. So you're kind of stuck right-clicking and doing delete. Now there is a little bit of a faster way. You can come here to select. Again, in the tile set select, you can now select the tiles you want to get rid of. And I'm going to hold down Control now and select, but I don't want this tile anymore, and I don't want any of these tiles. So I've now selected the tiles. I don't want. I can come back. I can now right-click and hit delete. But I missed these two, so I'm going to select, right-click, delete. And now it looks like I have the tiles I want. Now you can't activate tiles in the select, unfortunately, so you have to go back to setup if you want to activate any specific tiles again. All right, So now that I've got the tiles I want, let's talk about how I'm going to start setting up an Autotile. And where you want to go to next is to the paint function. So the paint function is going to allow us to actually manipulate the tiles. And what I want to do is terrains. But as you notice, I got nothing here. So we need to now add a terrain to our tile set. And the terrain is what we're going to be using for the auto tiling. So we're going to come back over to our tile set. And remember, if it's not editable for some reason, you can come down and click edit and then hit the back arrow, and now you've got this set. So we want to come down to the terrain sets. If you're going to be adding collisions, here's the physics layer, and you'd add an element to that, but we're just going to do terrains for now. So we come down to this chevron, click it open, and then there's under terrain sets, there's add element. And now we've added one terrain set to the array of terrain sets. But this is still not enough to actually add the tiles to our auto tile. We need to then click on the chevron underneath and add an element, and we'll call this road. Right now it's kind of this ugly brown color, so just to make it more visible, we'll make it a nice bright red. And okay, hit OK. So now I have a terrain added, and I'm going to we're going to start off by selecting just match sides, just for basic introduction. There is also match corners and sides and match corners, and we'll talk about match corners and sides. Match corners is a little more confusing. But let's start with match sides because that's the simplest. So now we're going to come back here, and just remember we're going to be in tile set paint, not tile map, but tile set paint. And we're now going to come down to our terrains, and as you can see, under terrain set, we now, because we added a terrain set, we now have terrain set 0, and that's that first element in the terrain array. And under terrain, we're going to select road. Now we can come over here to the tile set, and we see that the tiles that we have activated all have little white dots. Now, if you want to actually be painting in them, you have to clear all these white dots. The easiest way is just to hold down left mouse button and just scrub over all the tiles, and it removes the white dots, and now we're ready to actually paint. And you can see now we have this area here, and you can hold the middle mouse button to pan around, or you can zoom out and kind of zoom in on another area with the mouse wheel. But I'm going to start by zooming in, and you'll see that there's now this option to click on the 4 sides. Remember, we're just doing match sides, not match corners. So we have these 4 options, and then there's the center dot. The center dot means to actually use the tile in the tile set. So if you don't click it, it's not going to work. So I want to activate all the tiles that I'm going to use, and I'll show you what happens if you don't activate them, but let's just start by activating all these tiles we're going to use. So then we have to hold down the middle mouse button and pan around, and then add these 2 tiles too. All right. So now, how do we actually? What are we doing here? We want to match the sides, and so if you see here, this roadway I only want to place if I have a road above it and a road below it, but nothing to either side, right? If I have something to either side, why would I use this straight road? So you can just left click and select these tiles. And now what will happen is if there's a tile above and a tile below, this sort of pink bit mask is gonna select this tile. Similarly with this roadway, we will select the left and the right. All right. So what does that mean? Well, let's come to the tile map and let's actually start painting this roadway. So if you come back here to the tile map, now you can see again, I can just select them manually, but I don't want to do that. I'm right-clicking to erase. So now I want to actually paint those textures that I have. So I come over to under tile map to terrains, and I select the road, and now I see the tiles that I have activated. And I'm going to choose this pathway, and what this does is connects one road to another. And you can see that when I have those 2 tiles connected to the left, it's going to select those 2. And if I do up and down, it's going to select those two tiles because it's matching the sides. Remember, if I have a tile above and a tile below, it's going to select those sides. And obviously it's picking other things because we haven't given it enough options. But if we come back to the tile set, I can show you, let's say we reverse this and we pick the top and bottom here and left and right here. Well, now it's backwards, but it's going to, if I have a tile to the left and tile to the right, it's going to pick the up and down roadway. So let's come back to our tile map, click on the road, click on this, and as you can see, if I have two tiles to the right and left, it's now picking the wrong ones, whereas if I have up and down ones, it's now picking the sides. So this is obviously incorrect, and we'll come back. But that's just to show you that you can select the masks. Oops. You can select the masks wrong, and they will connect the wrong tiles. But here we want this way, this way. So what do we do for these curves? Well, it kind of makes sense, right? If we don't want to place this roadway if there's a tile above and tile to the left, but we want to place it if there's a tile to the right and tile to the bottom, and then it'll select this curved roadway. And you can see it very well visually matches up with the textures. So you can just come here and paint all those. Similarly with this cross, well, when am I going to use the intersection? I'm going to use the intersection if it's all around. And we're going to come down here. And when do I want this way? Well, I want it when it's here, here, and here. And I want this one. You can just keep holding the mouse button down and go to the next sets. So I want this one if it connects here and here, but not to the top side, but yes to the bottom side. I'm going to let go of my mouse. And when do I want this one? I want this one here, here, and here, but not when it connects there. This is a dead end, so I want to place this piece only when there's no tiles anywhere else except down. This one I want to place it as there's no tiles around but to the right. And this one I want no tiles around except to the left. So now let's come back to our tile map and let's start painting. Remember, we go tile map, you click on terrains, this tab here, click on the road terrain that we made. And now let's connect the road and let's see how this works. So now when I go to the right and use that linear one, it's drawing it and it's picking the tiles automatically. Now I want to go to the left. I'm just holding down the left mouse button and I'm drawing around. And then you have to want to connect those two. Then you come here and you can see this one has made a T, but let's say I add that in there. Now it's going to make a cross. I can right click to delete, or I can just come here and paint through it. And now we've made that intersection tile. And as you can see, it's just automatically laying in those tiles as it's supposed to. All right. Now, how do we do something a little more complex? Let's say, obviously this is nice for a linear straight road, but I want to now add some more complexity to the tiles, and there is going to be some finickiness to it as well. And so sometimes you do have to manually select a tile. Like let's say I just want an intersection there. You can kind of come in and just say, all right, I want it to look like that, or maybe I want both of these to look like that. All right, so let's start talking about a more advanced terrain set. So we're going to come back to our tile set because that's where we're going to do our editing. And now I want to match corners inside. So I'm going to just hold down right click and I'm going to erase all of this masking that I've done. And now I want to activate some of these more advanced tiles. So how do I do that? Let's remember, we come here to setup, and now I'm just going to start holding down the mouse button and clicking. Now I don't want these square tiles, so I'm going to leave those alone. I want that, I guess I forgot to activate that. These tiles are already activated, but now I kind of want these ones too. I'm going to use that circle pattern, not the square pattern. And then I want these ones. And I also want that solid one. All right, so let's go back to the basics. And then now we want, instead of match sides, we want to come to our terrain set here. And remember, if it's not there, go ahead and you click on your tile set, open up the little pop down, and come down to the terrain sets, which you can expand there, and match corners and sides. So now when we come over to our setup, and we click on the paint, now you can see instead of just those angles for each side and the center bit, now we have a full proper square of 9. And the same principle is going to hold true, but now you can see we still have those white dots, so I'm just going to come here and just hold down left click and paint over all these dots to clear all the dots, since we now activated them. And now what I want to do is start masking these ones. And the principle is going to be the same. I still need a center dot for all of the tiles I want to use. And now we're actually going to have to think about matching corners, and that's what this extra little bit is to match a corner. Well, the basic tiles are going to stay about the same. So this linear road piece, we want to connect it only if there's a tile above it, a tile below it, and nothing to this corner, nothing to that corner, nothing to this corner, and nothing to that corner. Similarly with this one, it's just a straight road piece, so we're going to hold down that. For this tile, we obviously want the center. We also want these curved areas, and you can just kind of come around here and paint like this. And what does this mean? This is just like the first time we did it, where we just want one to the right and to the bottom, but nothing in the corner. And you can see that's where it's going to draw that that green grassy area. This one is going to be where we do want corner. Let's say we do have a tile down here. We don't want to necessarily just connect it and miss that space. So what we're going to do is, just like the other one, we're going to draw around like this. But in this case, we want to color in the circle, because that means that there's tiles to the corner. Our T intersection will remain pretty much the same as the last one. We're going to make a cross there. For our dead ends, it's the same. If we don't have a tile anywhere else or in any of these corners and just a single connecting roadway, then we want that connected. Similarly with this one, we just want these two, and with this one, we just want those guys. With these T intersections, similar to the basic tiles, we're just going to want these ones. And again, I'm just holding down left click. But for these tiles, well, this is very similar to this tile over here, except that if there's stuff in the corner, well, we do want to actually use this tile. And so we're going to paint in this whole square. And you can see it very well matches visually the tile. For this guy, we're going to do just the top area. For this one, it's just the bottom. For the black square, the whole black square, well, when do we want this? We want it when there's literally tiles all around it, in all the corners and all the sides. So in this one, we're going to activate, and we're just going to paint the entire tile. With this one, it's basically just like this tile here, right here, except that it has a connection going up. So we're going to click there. This is the same as that other tile, but paint it down. And this is the same, but to the left, and this is the same, but to the right. Oh, and these is very much similar to this one, except the complete opposite, right? We're not going to do it if there's anything in the corners, but if there's tiles all around it, we're going to select these ones. All right, so now we've set up our auto tile, and it's not going to get every use case. So you're going to see there's going to be little bits of glitches here and there, depending on how complex we are. So let's go back to our tile map, and we'll click on the road, and we'll click on our little linear line, and that's not going to change too much, right? Our linear line is going to look pretty much the same, because it's just connecting tiles that were last connected to the tile. So it's not going to look around. This is where this button comes in. This connect mode is going to paint the terrain and connect it with all the surrounding tiles of the same terrain. And since we only have one terrain, it's only going to connect these. So as you can see, if we start to, I'm holding down left mouse button and paint tiles, you can see things are starting to get a little bit more complex. See, here we have that circle, and remember, because if we do sort of a wider circle here, you can see it's picking these simple tiles because it just has one tile here and one tile here, but nothing in this corner and nothing in that corner or these sides. But if you make a fully round circle, well, now you do have those tiles to the top and bottom, but you also have a tile. This tile has a tile in the corner, so it's going to pick that solid filled in one. Things obviously get a little bit more complex when you start to do these things, and as you can see, it's not always going to work perfectly. So sometimes you have to come into the empty tiles and sort of erase around these, and it starts to fix it. So that's just something to keep in mind, that sometimes you do have to you do have to erase empty tiles to get things to fix properly, or sometimes draw it in. And you can see that because of the nature of this, it can sometimes get a little bit confused if we haven't set up auto tiles for everything. But I hope this was useful to sort of at least get you started with auto tiling and Godot 4, since I saw a lot of tutorials for Godot 3, but nothing quite on Godot 4. The last thing we're gonna look at is if we come in and we zoom here, we'll notice that it's kind of blurry. And why is that? Well, it's because of Godot's default filtering for textures is that it tries to smooth out the textures. But if we want it to look more pixely, this is not going to work. So we can come here, click on our tile map, and if we come into the inspector, make sure you know you're on the basic. I didn't want, but you want to be on the basic inspector. And we come down here to the canvas item, and under the canvas item, you'll see texture. And under texture, there's going to be filter. And instead of inherit, we want to set it specifically to nearest. And the minute we click on nearest, you can see we're getting our pixels, we're getting our normal pixels back that we were hoping for, that pixel look. Let's say you don't want to have to click on every single texture you import and click on nearest. You can actually come here to project settings, and under rendering, this rendering chevron, and textures, instead of the default texture filter being linear, we want it to be nearest. Now, all the textures we import will be that pixelated look that we were hoping for. So because it's default, now you don't need to specify. You can come back here to the canvas item inherit, and it'll still look pixely because that's the default. If you want to set a texture now specifically to linear, you can, and then it'll look blurry. But now if we reset it back to the default, since we switched our project settings, it'll be pixelated. All right, well, I hope this helped you in some way get familiar at least with the start, and please, any corrections, any updates, please let me know in the comments, and I'm happy to try and make some edits.